Welcome. This is a little program we call Two-Way Tonight. Glad to have you be part of it. Thank you for joining. Incredible show tonight. Great guests, Mark McKinnon, former Congressman Dan Lipinski, and Marc Caputo of Axios, all inexplicably here on one stage. Very happy to have them. They'll be here in just a moment. Most of the news today is about immigration, and a lot of it is about that one immigration case, the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Some call him the Maryland man, or some call him not the Maryland man, but the man who was sent without due process to an El Salvadorian prison, where he remains to this day. Lots on that front. And I'll run through that, and we'll have our guests talk about it. I want to say something about the platform, okay? Two-Way is supposed to be different than other places, most other places. Long, sophisticated conversations about important topics that bring us all together as a community, where with peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace for all, we can talk about things that are complicated without a lot of negativity. There can be spirited discussion. There can be, and there should be, disagreement. But for me, the best episodes are when someone presents one point of view and another person, whether it's one of our guests or one of the community members, makes a different point, and people kind of have it out. And even if they don't agree in the end, they at least appreciate that their fellow Americans, as I often say, tens of millions, don't have the same point of view they do. We think that that's important conversation. It's interesting conversation, and it's conversation is perfect for this platform, because we're discussing it in an attempt to understand the facts, and the facts still remain a little bit murky, particularly regarding the break any laws or not. Another question. We have people on today who will discuss that, and we'll try to do it in a reasonable way. I'm kind of appalled as an American and as a journalist that we don't have the facts complete yet. But the White House today attempted to, on two fronts, seize control of this story and the definition of what this is about. Okay? On the one hand, they put out more information about this gentleman, which they said went to the question of whether he was in a gang or not. And the other thing they did was they brought to the White House briefing room a little bit before 5 Eastern time a woman named Patty Marin. I will tell you that one of the greatest failures of the media in 2016, it was a dual track failure in covering Donald Trump, was a failure to appreciate the power of the stories of family members who lost loved ones to violent crime committed by people in the country illegally. Those stories were barely covered. And Donald Trump would talk about them everywhere. And I went to Trump rallies in over 30 states, and he would often tell those stories, and the crowd understood the power of them. And my colleagues in the press, for the most part, did not. So number one, they didn't understand the power of the stories. And number two, they didn't cover them. Those people should have been profiled everywhere. Those people should have been national celebrities, regardless of the politics. Imagine having your loved one killed by someone in this country illegally. Okay. So the White House did two things today. They put out information, which we'll talk about in a minute, about Mr. Abrego Garcia. And they had Patty Marin come to the White House podium and tell the story of her murdered daughter. Mother of five, murdered daughter, Rachel. I don't care if you hate Trump. I don't care if you're a journalist and you're supposed to be objective. Her appearance in the briefing room was heartbreaking as she told the story of her daughter. And she said what the White House has been saying, which is Senator Van Hollen, who flew to El Salvador to try to free and bring back to the United States Mr. Garcia, that he had barely paid any attention to the death of a Marylander named Rachel Warren, who was killed by someone in this country illegally, who's been convicted for the crime, sexually assaulted and killed her. Okay. So, as I said, we'll get to all that in a moment. I love this platform because of the positivity, not in the chat, which I don't read, but I hear is filled with smack. I hate that, and I want to still solve that. Wouldn't it be great if we were the only people with a chat, whether it's here on the platform or on YouTube, that didn't have negativity in it? Again, spirited discussion, great, but personal attacks, saying I look fat in this shirt, etc. Great, but I love how positive people are about it, whether they support or oppose Donald Trump, whatever their point of view. I want to show you some tweets The Daily Caller wrote a story today about new media and shows like this, and they wrote some very nice things about two-way. And Dan Turntine, co-host of the morning meeting, put this on Twitter. This would be number 10. Dan did a very nice tweet, talked about how proud he is to be part of two-way, very gracious words about me. And then normally on X, if somebody tweets something positive, take this full, Sam, if you can. Normally, if somebody puts something positive on X, it's followed by a series of very negative tweets. Instead, because this community, you all are so positive and so supportive, look at the tweets that follow Dan's very positive tweet. Go back one if you can. I just want to read that first one. Peace, love, and understanding and the presumption of grace is the most amazing guiding philosophy of any media on the current scene. The result can't miss programming. I'm always totally annoyed if I get interrupted while watching morning meeting. So nice, Diana. Thank you for that. Next. I think, all right, I'm scroll down. Maybe the tweets will get negative. There's nothing like it. Thoughtful, cordial, insightful, unscripted, and respectful. It's the only program I make time to listen to daily. Kudos. Next, from Vance, nice to have daily news and political content from people who know what they're talking about instead of primped up script readers. In between there's some ad thing that somebody went on and did by a bot. All right, continuing reading down. I think, well, somebody's going to attack us before too long. Nice to have daily news and political content for people who know what they're talking about. We read that one already. I think all of you have created the common sense channel we've always asked for, et cetera, et cetera. All positive. And I say this to say thank you all for being so positive about what we're doing, not just generous in your praise, but attitudinally positive. But I also say this story that I'm talking about now, a woman, daughter, mother of her grandchildren was killed by someone in this country illegally. And the White House is now claiming that this other gentleman is not a Maryland Dad of the Year. We'll talk about that. I want the country to be able to come together about this. We should all, rather than say, well, I can't be supportive of Patty Marin. I can't be concerned about her story because she's there for Trump. That's not the America any of us should want to live in. Okay. Now, to bring myself down to earth after all those positive tweets, I look back at Twitter, which I look at slightly more than I looked at the chat. And I got this one, number 11, just so you know, it's not all positive. I like this tweet a lot. Hey, two-way app, when your platform ultimately fails, Mark Halperin and Dan Turntine should definitely note this moment as the beginning of the end. Dan's full-throated support and Mark's fake mea culpa last night fool no one. You're all vile operatives with zero morals. So don't worry, it's not all positive out there. You don't need to think it's all positive, but I read that and I say, well, I feel bad for that person. I feel bad. Hopefully we're not going to fail, but certainly Dan is not vile. I'll let others judge me. Raise your hand if you want to be in on the conversation. So going to bring in our guests, and then we're going to show them some elements and see what they have to say about this case. And I'm interested in what each and every one of them thinks about what is going on with this immigration case. Mark McKinnon, welcome. Marc Caputo, welcome. How confusing, 3 Marks. And then the odd man out is Congressman Dan Lipinski. Congressman, we're going to call you Mark tonight, if that's okay. All right, unmute you all. Gentlemen, welcome in. Unmute yourselves, please. Thank you for joining. Mark McKinnon, you've been a passionate advocate for sane and humane immigration policy for decades. Love for you to start. Just where do you think we are as a nation in grappling with the new Trump policies and on this particular case of the gentleman sent to El Salvador? Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Mark. This issue has been such a long arc for the country, obviously, but for me personally, I was attracted to George W. Bush because of his compassionate conservative message and it's really warm embrace of immigrants. But he recognized problems in the system and he committed to reforming the immigration system. And that was part of the 1999-2000 campaign. And he campaigned on that idea, embracing the idea of immigration reform, even though a lot of people warned him not to. But he did it. He said, you know, this is something I believe needs to be done, and it'd be good for us, good for the country, good for our values. And it's interesting to note that now, you know, almost, well, a quarter of a century later, nothing, there's been no progress. In fact, in many ways, we've gone backwards a lot. And while I'm pretty passionate, I'm pretty, you know, I'm probably further left than a lot of Democrats on this issue, generally speaking. I do think that the Democrats abandon the playing field on this issue. It is a problem. I mean, you can't deny that it's a problem, that it's a significant problem, and Donald Trump, that was the first thing that came out of his mouth, and it's the last thing that will probably come out of his mouth before he exits the stage, if he ever does. But he made it clear that it's something that he cares about and he's passionate about. And the fact is that people do care about this issue. And I think that Democrats made a horrible mistake by by just ignoring it completely, by not even acknowledging that there was an issue, by never going to the border. So I think they handed Republicans and Trump an issue and just abandoned the playing field. And I think that was a huge, I think it was a mistake, not just strategically and politically, but I think it was the wrong thing to do. But I will say this current issue is it's an electric issue, man. There's a lot of voltage, and it is for a reason because there's so much passion on both sides.
Yeah.
And I will just say, generally speaking, that I recognize the politics of this issue, and I think that the Trump administration 100% understands the politics of this issue, and that they really have so much latitude here to do whatever they want. And if they're going to test executive authority, this is the issue to do it on because they have so much support from most Americans on the issue, generally speaking. So. Now the legality of it, I have a ton of questions about, and I do think that if there's going to be an Andrew Jackson moment, I think this could be the one. Jackson being the one time who defied the Supreme Court, and we'll see. But if Trump inside Trump world, they really think that there is a inevitable collision with the Supreme Court, this might be where it happens.
Congressman, thank you, Mark. Congressman, what's your overall view of where we are as a country right now on this issue and your view of this particular case of this gentleman sent to a prison in El Salvador?
Well, when I was in Congress, I mean, even going back 20 years ago, there was no issue that was more contentious in my district than the immigration issue because I had people, very, very strong feelings on both sides of this issue. And there are multiple times where I thought fights were going to break out at town hall meetings between the, those who are there saying, we need to legalize everyone here, and those who are saying we just need to, send them back from where they came. And it was a very tough issue, and I understand the high emotions on this. And I think Democrats, as Mark said, Democrats really went to the extreme on this, that anyone who wants to come to this country should be welcomed into this country. When all of those presidential candidates raised their hands to say it should not be illegal to cross the border, it showed that they were completely out of touch. And so that opened it up for Donald Trump. Obviously, politically, this is a very good case for President Trump. And this is the one issue that he really is popular on right now, especially the problem with the economy. People aren't happy with the economy, what Trump has done. Unfortunately, it does trouble me that the administration went to the Supreme Court and said, we mistakenly deported this man. They said that to the Supreme Court. There's not a question about that. And then they now they're backtracking off of it. The courts protected this man, whoever he is, whatever he has done. The courts said he cannot be deported. And if the Trump administration wants to take this to the court and get that changed so that he's not protected, I think they should do that. Now, so it troubles me that what the Trump administration has done, but it is not I should say, for the Trump side, it's a politically powerful winning issue. And it's unfortunate in the sense that, like I said, they go to the Supreme Court and say one thing, they claim something else to the public. They're not following the law on this, and that is troubling.
Yeah, Congressman, thank you. Marc Caputo of Axios, I have 3 questions for you regarding where we are. First, the congressman says that the administration argued to the Supreme Court that they deported him by mistake, or conceded that they deported him by mistake. They now do seem to be taking that back. What's going on there? Are they saying
it's typical,
they never
typical
said it?
Typical Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
Typical Trump world, where we're going to say one thing in court, we're going to say one thing
Right.
when we're not under oath. One correction, nothing personal. He's not spared from deportation, Abrego. He's spared from deportation to El Salvador. I put my conspiracy hat on and think, is this an accident that was done on purpose? Because what makes Abrego's case sort of so unique is there was a deportation order for him. There was a hold on deporting him to El Salvador because he had a credible fear of persecution there. And they had obviously tried to kick him out of the country before. The Trump administration, Trump won. So I just wonder if there was someone there in the bowels of ICE who at the right time was like, you know what? This guy's case slips through just enough cracks to cause just enough trouble to occupy just enough airspace that this is what everyone's going to talk about.
Right.
Now,
Mark,
I can't say that definitely happened, but that's what it looks like from here.
Right. Okay. Second question. The president, in an interview this week, held open the possibility of a path to legal status for people who came to the country illegally, do a touchback, come here sponsored by employers, and have to be quote unquote good people. Mm-hmm. But most politicians,
amnesty. Yeah, amnesty is what they call it. Yeah,
So was that on purpose? Has there been any blowback?
My Spanish is bad, but lo que salga de los cojones, whatever comes out of his balls, is a caudillo phrase for a strong man. Being here in Miami, in a place which is 51% foreign-born, I can tell you that there's more of a familiarity with this style of politics where Trump is going to say one thing one minute and another thing another minute. For a guy who trademarked himself as the decisive leader who says you're fired, he's kind of wishy-washy and just does a lot of thinking out loud. And I chalk this up to a lot
kind
of
of wishy-washy.
Yeah, that's well, fair enough.
Okay. Last question. I'm going to save till I show everybody some elements, but I want to know why the White House today double-barreled pushback on this issue, both putting out information on Kilmar Abrego Garcia and bringing Patty Murrin to the briefing room. So first, number one, Sam, 2 federal judges now are suggesting that the administration is not complying with court orders and have made various challenges to the White House to say you can't disregard, you need to be vigorously and rigorously complying. We'll see where that goes. Senator Van Hollen went to El Salvador, arrived today, and he's claiming now that the vice president of El Salvador has told him that the U.S. is paying the El Salvador government to hold Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Let's play a little bit of number 2, please.
They illegally abducted Mr. Abrego Garcia from Maryland and sent him to CICA, which is a notorious prison here in El Salvador. In fact, it's a prison where they say they send the worst of the worst, right? That's where they send the terrorists. Now, the courts of the United States have said there's no evidence to support the charge that he's part of MS-13. So I asked the vice president whether or not El Salvador has any evidence that he's part of MS-13 or has committed a crime. So I asked the vice president if Abrego Garcia has not committed a crime and the U.S. courts have found that he was illegally taken for the United States, and the government of El Salvador has no evidence that he was part of MS-13, why is El Salvador continuing to hold him in CICA? And his answer was that the Trump administration is paying El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, to keep him at CCOT.
Now, I don't know if that's an explosive charge, but I believe it's a new one, and it's something that people are going to look into. Today, as I said, the White House presented a double-barreled pushback on the media and on Democrats who are critical of the decision. First, number 6, please. They put out documents, about 20 pages, here's a few of them, from 2019, saying more conclusively than has been said previously that, in fact, he was a member of MS-13. Not going to be able to read the documents, but these documents say that he was. And, of course, being in a gang is not necessarily a crime, but if you're a gang member and you're in the country illegally, I think a lot of Americans would say you're not entitled to much due process. Here is Caroline Leavitt at the briefing. This would be number 4, please, making the claim that he was a member of MS-13.
Today, we have officially learned Democrat officials still refuse to accept the will of the American people. Maryland Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen rushed to Dulles Airport this morning to fly to El Salvador, potentially using taxpayer dollars, to demand the release of deported, illegal, alien MS-13 terrorist. The Democrats and the media in this room have continually and wrongly labeled Kilmar Abrego Garcia as a Maryland father. There is no Maryland father. Let me reiterate. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist who was deported back to his home country. And when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was originally arrested, he was wearing a sweatshirt with rolls of money covering the ears, mouth, and eyes of presidents on various currency denominations. This is a known MS-13 gang symbol of hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. Abrego Garcia was also arrested with 2 other well-known members of the vicious MS-13 gang. And 2 separate judges found that Abrego Garcia was a member of MS-13, and that finding has never been disputed. And just this morning, it was revealed through Maryland court documents that Abrego Garcia's wife petitioned for an order of protection against him for 2 instances of domestic violence in May of 2021. And here is the order.
Okay, so that's a new charge. You can stop this thing. That's a new charge. They say is documented from Maryland court records. And again, does it mean he should have been sent to an El Salvador prison? From some people, no, but it's certainly a new allegation. It certainly is something that will color the politics of it. As I said, one thing they did was they presented new information about whether he was in a gang and allegations of spousal abuse. The other thing they did was to bring Patty Moran to the briefing room. You saw her there standing next to Caroline Leavitt, talking about her daughter. And I'm going to play you a little bit of it. I find it incredibly sad. You should watch the whole thing, regardless of what you think about this issue. Here, number 5 is Patty Moran.
Who didn't even acknowledge or bear death that she endured, leaving her 5 children without a mother and now a grandbaby without a grandmother, so that he can use my taxpayer money to fly to El Salvador to bring back someone that's not even an American citizen. Why does that person have more right than I do, or my daughter, or my grandchildren? I don't understand this.
You can say what you want about the senator from Maryland and his choices, but it has to break your heart. Here's a video we just got of her in the Oval Office with the president. Go ahead and play that.
Beautiful. She's a beautiful woman. She's been through hell. She's been through hell, right?
Oh, yes.
Your daughter's looking down proud of you. You know that. Just keep it going.
I know.
Keep it going.
It's like you,
Stay with that one.
it's like you said, we have a purpose.
It's a purpose. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
She's proud of you.
Okay. Marc Caputo first. Why is the White House doing so much today to push back on this?
Because it benefits them politically. I mean, Donald Trump's net approval rating on the economy is down. Consumer sentiment is down. The stock market relative to where it was on Liberation Day is down. The outlook for growth in the United States is down economically. And so Democrats are like, hey, let's talk about immigration. Let's talk about this case. I mentioned that on social media, Twitter yesterday, and of course, I was promptly accused of being a fascist. But I mean, the reality is, the White House is just like, oh my God, Democrats are talking about what we want to talk about, and an issue that people will fly spec the polls. Nevertheless, Donald Trump has a net favorable approval rating over. So this is sort of elementary politics now. How long this lasts, I'm not sure. But that's why they're talking about it.
I'm going to flip around at 6:30 Eastern time in just a moment and see if Patty Moran makes it onto the evening newscast of the network news. If past his prologue, she won't. And if I was executive producing or anchoring one of those shows, I would lead with her, not to help President Trump, but that's an American citizen. Okay.
Yeah, but that's not how the media operates.
We'll see. Mark McKinnon, I'd like for you to talk about the semiotics of this, of what the White House is doing and what the Democrats are doing, and just what you think of it as a matter of politics and policy and heart.
Yeah, semiotically speaking, they're pushing back on the legal narrative to make a broader narrative about just the sense that, again, just painting a broader palette without having to get into the details of it, just to generally suggest this wasn't really a good guy we're talking about. There's allegations of domestic abuse. There's there's that, there's the other, to sort of just paint a broader picture that ties to the narrative of the woman who spoke at the briefing and with the president, that this really is about just getting bad people out of our country that aren't supposed to be here. And if you can get people focused on that, which is much easier to do than the legal argument, which is very tangled, it takes somebody who's law school to understand the legal trail here. So I think the effort today was designed to get off the legal narrative onto just a general narrative about humanity, and on that account, it's pretty successful, because again, you just sort of say, generally speaking, to people, should bad people be in this country that aren't supposed to be here? Everybody would say sure.
Congressman, if you still were in office, how would you react to today's events if asked?
Well, first of all, is a mistake, and the Democrats keep doing this over and over again, is to try to make the claim that every immigrant here is, dad of the year. That's not the issue here. Whether he's a good man or a bad man, and Democrats just keep falling into that trap, because Americans, they don't want people who are dangerous, who they see as dangerous people in the country. I think the Democrats should let the courts play this out.
Yeah.
And see where it goes. The real concern is that President Trump said in the Oval Office, the homegrowns are next, suggesting that American citizens will be sent down to this prison in El Salvador. And that's really what a even bigger concern is here. But I think right now, Democrats, instead of, like you said, just playing right into what Trump wants to talk about, let the courts deal with this, because right now, the Trump administration is not winning in the courts.
Congressman, did you serve with Chris Van Hollen in the House?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did.
So if you were a senator from Maryland, or Chris Van Hollen asked you, would you say that gentleman is his constituent? Is that gentleman his constituent?
Yes.
Yes. So if Chris Van Hollen said to you, should I fly to El Salvador and get my constituent back, what would you tell him?
Well, first of all, I didn't ever tell my colleagues what they should do.
Well, let's say he asked your advice and said, Dan, I want to know I want your judgment. Should I fly to El Salvador on a highly publicized trip and try to bring my constituent, I'm saying that in air quotes because I'm sure there are people on this platform who don't agree, but should I fly back to get this, try to bring this man back? What would your advice have been to him?
Well, first of all, let me take a step back. On constituent, everyone is counted right now in terms of representation in drawing a congressional district, which I learned while I was there, whether they're a citizen or not, legal or not. So I say this man is a constituent. I would say, Chris, it's probably the right thing to do, but politically, this is not going to look good for you. However, he's representing Maryland, so maybe it is good in Maryland.
Mark,
Go ahead, Mark. Go
just
ahead.
want to jump in one other thing. I mean, I talked about the broad strokes, and people generally have a feeling that if there's a bad person in the country illegally, they shouldn't be here. But I was also struck by the Grassley town hall. There's also a sense of all Americans, including hardcore Republicans in Iowa, that if an innocent man was sent to wrongly to a prison, that's wrong too. So I mean, there is a reflex about immigration and making sure that people are here illegally, but there's also a reflex that innocent people shouldn't be sent to be incarcerated in a deadly.
Yeah. Mark, one more question for you, Mark McKinnon, and then we're going to talk to Marc Caputo about a different story. Then we're going to go to your question. So if you want to be in the conversation, please raise your hand. And if you've never asked a question before, tonight's the night. Mark McKinnon, do you agree with the congressman that someone in this country illegally in a state or congressional district is a constituent?
Tough call. That's why I know. That's why the only thing I'd run for is the border.
Yeah. If you were a House member, would you do constituent service for people here illegally?
Yeah, boy, good question. I'm taking the fifth, Mark. I don't know. I would.
All right. One topic. Marc Caputo broke another story, which he does on a regular basis. It's a news machine, like a popcorn maker. Just plug it in, put in the kernels, and poof. Tell us what you reported about Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and the Pentagon, please.
Well, there's that reporting yesterday that the Pentagon is doing some mole hunting and leak repair and has bounced a few people or put them on paid leave for leaking, in part because of the report on March 20th in the New York Times that Elon Musk was going to go to the Pentagon and get a top secret war briefing about what would happen if a military conflict arose with China. And when the New York Times reported this, later that evening, Donald Trump said it was fake news and it was totally fake. And the next day, Elon Musk showed up at the Pentagon, but he didn't get a China briefing. And so that seemed to be that. Well, it turns out I found out recently, and this situation I just described provided sort of the news hook for it, the news peg, that Trump was right that it was fake news because Donald Trump personally intervened and said, what the fuck is Elon doing over there? Donald Trump was highly concerned and has been concerned in part and at times about Musk's potential conflicts of interest, but he was particularly concerned about the idea that Elon Musk, a globalist in good standing in the White House, which is not a common thing, someone who has a lot of business with China through Tesla and other companies, was going to be getting a war briefing about the military plans of the United States in case of a conflict with China. So it was Donald Trump that put the kibosh on it. Now, to be clear, the source who told me this, a very trustworthy, good one, had said that Trump still loves Elon, but this war briefing about China was just a red line. It was I'm paraphrasing here now, it was a bridge too far for him. And so Trump put a stop to that. It's a good example of how, at a certain point, Donald Trump was willing to let Elon run roughshod over the federal government, cut with Doge, do whatever he wants and say whatever he wants to various people in the administration and on social media. But when it came to this discrete issue of a military briefing about war plans with China, for Donald Trump, that was too much.
Mark, do you understand what's going on with the Pentagon? It's kind of an extraordinary spectacle to see 3 top aides to the Pentagon secretary frog marched out of the Pentagon. Is he involved with this? Is this happening against his wishes? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I have I have speculation. It would probably be inappropriate for me to give it because it might be wrong.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted because I'm watching the news. And so far, no one will be surprised that the major broadcast networks on their flagship broadcasts so far have not shown a frame of Patty Moran, even though on at least two of the networks they're talking about immigration. So grateful to all three of you gentlemen for being here. Bring folks in. If you want to ask about something about immigration, you're welcome to, but obviously it's the topic of the day here, so feel free to ask about that. Mr. Bradley, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind after you unmute.
Calling
There you
from
go.
Costa Rica. Been a loyal follower of this program since, I think, October. This is haven't been appearing live recently because I had to get a video camera when my computer crashed. Anyhow, here's my concern. And it will evolve into a question. But as I look at this whole situation with the immigration and the courts and the pushback from the administration, I can't help but feel that the Democrats had if not a policy, an awareness that massive immigration in violation of our immigration laws could not be reversed. But for the simple reason that once you are in the country, you have a certain amount of due process. No matter what the circumstance is, everybody who is in this country, who can set foot on this country, has certain, at least minimal administrative due process rights. It depends on how you came in and under what authority, and whether it was temporary or permanent, or whether or not you're a refugee fearing violence. But it certainly seems that to the average American, most of the people have come to the country for economic reasons. But how that is established in a court of law is going to be extremely time-consuming and expensive. Now, I'm a retired lawyer, 80 years old, and I didn't do this kind of work, but I certainly understand how easy it is. For example, a court once referred to deportation as the civil equivalent of the death penalty. Given that perspective, the system already was overrun. People aren't even getting court dates. The catch and release was simply because there were so many hundreds of thousands crossing the border that they couldn't set up court dates.
Mr. Bradley, I appreciate the whole context. If you got a question, ask it. Otherwise, I'm going to get folks to comment. But if you got a quick question.
Quick question is, this is extra legal. No single Supreme does. Well, I guess my question is this: are we headed to a point in time when there's out and out defiance of the courts?
Okay,
I'll take that. Yeah. I think it's important to remember that this case, whether it was selected, which I'm starting to suspect, or just as coincidental, has enough vagueness in it where it's going to fuzz the answer to that question, because he has been given due process. He's gone through the process, and a judge has found he's eligible to be deported, just not to El Salvador. And then he was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. And then a court said, look, you have to facilitate and effectuate his release and return to the United States. And then the Supreme Court mucked that up and said, okay, you got to facilitate it, but effectuate, well, we don't know because of Article 2, which, we don't know if the court can limit a president's foreign policy power, and this guy's now in a foreign land. So there are all of these different vague issues here. But if we are going to go down the path of defying a court order openly, this is one of the stepping stones, because there are so many, there's such a wide margin of error here. It's not that clear. The Supreme Court ruling stunk. It wasn't clear. And this case is going to wind up back there anyway.
Congressman.
Thank you.
I assume it stunk because they wanted to get a 9-0 decision.
That's
my guess.
Yeah. They still didn't get it. Congratulations, right, guys?
And well, I mean, they kicked it back down.
Right, they remanded.
So, and yeah, we'll see. And this is exactly the type of case where President Trump would want to, really go against saying, hey, I don't care what the court says. This is the right thing to do because it would be popular. And so I'm starting to believe now what Marc Caputo, what you said is, maybe this was all done on purpose politically.
Yeah.
It's
a hell of an accident. I gotta say.
And Mark, if one of these individuals were in my district, I would not offer services, but I'd offer advice just to get legal or self-deport.
Yeah. Timothy, thank you. Grateful to you for the question. Gentlemen, thank you. Let's go to Victor. Victor, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know what you're holding, where you are, and what's on your mind.
Hi, this is my Shiba Inu, who I just used to get you to call on me.
Worked perfectly. Has a beautiful, beautiful dog.
My son named him Rocky. If it had been up to me, I would have named him Elon, but I let my son pick the name. I'm calling from the Bahamas. I have two short observations, one of which is hopefully amusing, the other which is probably a bit grim, and then a slight question. The amusing thing is I'm Gen X, and thanks to this whole story, the Tom Petty song Jamming Me has been stuck in my head for the past 2 weeks with that line about take back El Salvador. I just can't get it out of my head. The other thing is it took the US a decade to deport John Demjanjuk, who literally pushed naked children into the gas chambers of Sobibor. And what I see some of people wanting is they want to get this guy and everybody else stuck in the court process so they can appeal and appeal and appeal and nothing happens. So my question for those talking about due process is, how much due process is this guy going to get? Because if it's the decade that John Demjanjuk got, I'm not down with that.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump's not going to give him a decade, no matter what. I can tell you that. Anybody want to comment on that?
This guy's not going to draw a free breath for a while, I think. And the federal government, DOJ, said in the reply to briefs yesterday that if for some reason he winds up back in the United States, they're just going to deport him somewhere else.
Yeah, two things. I don't appreciate, Victor, you putting that in my head with that song, because I'll be thinking about it all night. The other is, I'm trying to remember that case you're talking about, and I'm thinking that there were some members of Congress who were supportive of him and saying, don't, there's questions here, don't deport him. But I can't comment anymore on that because I don't remember the details.
Okay. Victor, thank you. Grateful to you. I'm still monitoring the news. Again, so far, no sign of.
You're like Diogenes running around the forum with
I'm going to keep watching.
Looking for an honest man.
I'm going to keep watching until I see. Daniel, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know which overseas island location you are in and what's on your mind.
From Kansas.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Daniel in Arizona, sunny Scottsdale. Thanks for having me. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say this is a perfect case why two-way is so important for America and Americans. Like, I do feel like the mainstream media and the politicians are driving a wedge between us. And I agree with Marc Caputo that, they are trying to get us off the signal gate and all the other things that are going on and talking about immigration. And, Democrats are dying on this hill, and it's going to go on for a long time. I agree. Like, everything all the politicians are saying right now, they're all lying when they're talking, and they're all just saying their talking points on this whole case. But I just wanted to say, please just get off your teams and, just be team unity, team humanity, team America. And I was really bad. I was a big conservative for a long time. And I'm just trying to decouple from the whole Republican Party and just be a free thinker.
Amen. Thank you for that. Did you want to ask a question or just say what you said?
No, Marc Caputo.
Okay.
I was just agreeing with him.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Love you.
Kind kind of
Thank
wisdom
you.
I expect from someone named Daniel. So.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you. Appreciate it. NBC is showing Patty Moran and her
There you
daughter.
go.
So,
Wow. Hey, Peacock steps it up.
amazing. Now, will there be a profile of her tomorrow in the New York Times? No. Anyway, they showed her, and I'm grateful to them for doing that. Okay. Let's see. Let's go to Reynolds. Reynolds, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind tonight.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. I don't know why we're still talking about him, because it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court rules. El Salvador would have to release him. I mean, what is the Supreme Court going to do? Is like send the 75th Ranger Regiment down there to go get him? I doubt that's ever going to happen.
The old Mussolini line, right? How many divisions has the Pope?
Yeah.
Well, the United States could stop paying for him to be held.
Well, if that's true.
But that still doesn't change where he is. So the Supreme Court hasn't, I mean, it'd be like, someone gets executed and the Supreme Court rules an hour later, don't execute him.
Sure.
Well, it's a little late. I mean, the cat's out of the bag.
I mean, in fairness, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like Bukele the El Salvador president has tried to get on the good side of Trump for years and spent millions of dollars lobbying and lavished him with praise and did everything. He's finally was in the White House, and him and Trump are yucking it up. If Donald Trump tells Bukele tomorrow, release this guy, he's going to release him. Release this guy and dress him in all black. The guy's going to look like Johnny Cash.
Yeah, but Trump's never going to say that. So
yeah,
and
that's the point.
The Supreme Court can't make him. But the bigger issue, I think, is this overall immigration, like HB1s and so forth. Because if you just sort of look at it, the amount of technology and the changes that are going to happen in the next 10 years, if you look at, self-driving cars, which will probably be a fact of life in 10 years from now, the biggest employment sector in America are people who drive cars, trucks, and so forth. So you're going to have a huge amount of people just due to technology that will become unemployed. And that's just the way technology works. So I think there should be a bigger discussion on immigration in the sense, do we need as much immigration? Because we're not going to need as many people. And you hear people talking about, well, one day, no person will have to work. I mean, that could be 30 or 50 years from now. But I don't care so much about this individual situation as much as I do think there needs to be a broader picture of what kind of immigration we should have and look at it through the lens of where technology is going, because that's going to impact. And if you look at immigrants who've come to America, when their children become U.S. citizens, they become less pro-immigration because they now have American children who are worried about their American children getting jobs, whether they come from Asia or Central America or so forth. Yep. You can see it in these studies, and I don't think anyone's talking about that. They impact that technology. I work for a company, and we're using AI, and it's doing a ton of work to where, it helps us out a great bit, but if it's helping us out, we don't need to hire as many people in the future.
Yep.
And I don't think people are looking at that, and I don't understand why people in Congress aren't approaching it that way. I would think Elon Musk would talk more about that, but if you have self-driving 18-wheelers, that's a ton of jobs that are just lost overnight. And I don't know why we don't have a serious discussion about that.
Reynolds,
thank you for following on me.
Reynolds, thank you. Mark McKinnon, Congressman, thoughts on that?
We don't have a serious conversation on that because the answers are going to be tough. Well, first of all, it's hard to figure out the answers, but they're going to be difficult, and neither Democrats nor Republicans really want to deal with, figuring out what do we do, with our changing needs for workers in this country with AI and automation. And so I think the Republicans, Donald Trump wants to give us this idea that we're somehow going to go back in time, and have all those jobs again. Although, there's no bigger supporter of manufacturing than me and then the work I did in Congress. But we're not going back. But it's tough. And politicians don't want to touch these tough issues.
Mark McKinnon.
Well, I think those are issues that could easily be addressed in a comprehensive package, and I think that the smartest thing Democrats could do politically is to get that bill done, go to Republicans, give them what they want, and get a few things that they need, like on those topics that you suggested.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Reynolds. Appreciate you being part of this. Grateful to you.
Thank you.
All right. As I say in the vernacular, I'm old enough to remember when people like George W. Bush and Mitt Romney were demonized by the left as being Satan, as being the furthest right, most objectionable possible people who could ever be president of the United States. And now, of course, there's a fair amount of nostalgia for those two gentlemen in the wake of Donald Trump people. And let's say, oh my goodness, we need someone of the decency of a Mitt Romney or George W. Bush.
Binders of women. Binders of women.
I do. Mark McKinnon.
Full of women.
Mark McKinnon worked with George W. Bush in 2000, 2004. He's friends with the former president and wrote a piece for Vanity Fair. We put that up about a reunion that he attended. Mark, I'd love for you to talk about the 25th reunion. Where was it? Who went? And why you think it's important in the context of the moment we're in.
Well, it was the 25th reunion of the Bush 2000 presidential campaign, and it was held in Austin, Texas. And it was incredibly well attended, 225 people. I won't get into specifics about who was there or not there, just for privacy.
I don't mean names, but it was people who worked on the campaign. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, literally everybody who worked on the campaign that I can think of was there, and a lot of the I mean, it was a very tight knit group, as you know, all presidential campaigns are. Of course, you build friendships that last a lifetime. But the interesting thing about it that I commented on is that it was a very celebratory moment. Particularly because we never got to celebrate. We never got to pop the champagne corks because it got thrown into a runoff and everybody was spread around the country. And so there was never a moment where we all got to high five and hug each other and say we won. Well, we did briefly, but then it got pulled back. So there was never really that moment. So it served as that, and it was a great reunion for all those reasons. And to toast our old boss and all the things that he accomplished. But it was also bittersweet for many of us, not for all of us, but for a lot of us, there was a sense that a lot of what we'd built and the president had worked on are being stripped away. When you talk about PEPFAR and a lot of what was done with Ted Kennedy and the federal education standards. I don't need to go down the list. I think a lot of them are obvious to your viewers, but listen, it was a different time, and I'm nostalgic about that, but I'm realistic about it too. And I understand that politics have changed and they've moved past, the compassionate conservative era. I miss it. A lot of people don't. I wish there was more compassion in the Republican Party. So I'm not here to bang the drum and say that we were right or we were wrong, but I will tell you this, that I remember very distinctly that so much of our messaging was about returning honor and integrity to the White House.
Yeah.
And in Bush world, you hear those words all the time: honor, integrity, character, decency.
Yeah.
Good man. Those are qualities and characteristics that were part of an era that you don't hear much about anymore. I'll just say that.
Mark, are there a lot of MAGA people at that event?
There were. I mean, again, I don't want to name names, but there were some recognizably MAGA people there. So I don't want to speak for everybody, but I'm just saying that was the general sense that I had in the room.
And I just ask you to super generalize again. No, you don't want to name names. What makes a Bushy a MAGA person versus someone who's not? Is there any through line to that?
Getting elected.
Huh.
I'll just leave it at that.
Congressman, you were Democratic Congressman. Did you ever have any impure political feelings about George W. Bush or Mitt Romney that in retrospect you think were silly?
Well, the type of Democrat I was, probably, doesn't really count that way. I mean,
yeah. If we went on Google, could we find you saying a negative word about the character of George Bush?
No, you couldn't.
Okay.
And I just wonder, as Mark was talking about this, I wonder if it were not for Iraq, the Iraq War, what the George W. Bush presidency would have been, but and I think it really, for whatever was President Bush's fault or not, I mean, it just really turned a lot of Republicans. They were frustrated. They felt betrayed. And, I still think 2008 was a year that we've not talked nearly enough about, and how much of that changed America, and especially American politics. But I mean, George W. Bush, everything, I met him a few times, didn't really know him, but, there's no one that doesn't say he's a good man.
Yeah. Marc Caputo.
I was reporting out a story today. It's held, unfortunately, about sort of Trump's tariff brain. And in order to do it, I wound up calling an old source of mine who's a Rubio guy. And you would have been at the time a Bushy, right? And I said, give me an idea of like what people don't understand about Trump's tariff brain and Trump time. And this is almost direct quotes. These are from my notes. And he told me, the people who are struggling most now with the world that Trump is building are the ones who built the previous one. These are the people who said, America is awesome. America is the greatest. Free trade is awesome. NATO is excellent. American power is boundless. They don't understand the way it went so wrong for so many people, and it was a bipartisan failure. Our party is Republican. For us, it was the Wall Street Journal editorial page. It was the Council of Foreign Relations, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And everyone was saying, hey, everyone, it's working out great. But there was this undertone of Americans and towns across the country who were saying, this doesn't work for me. And it was Trump who inherited this from Perot and from Buchanan. And there were people like Vance and Rubio, he said, who really felt that. And what the people nowadays don't understand is that that's what Trump represents. And what's interesting and what made me think of this is in Mark talking about the Bush era and Dan talking about the 08 era, is there is this strain in Republican and politics and in, like I said, sort of American culture now, where Donald Trump is increasingly at least using the language of the anti-elite, and it's appealing more and more to a lot of people because that Iraq war, to Dan's point, was just disastrous. But more so, these free trade agreements, the hollowing out of a lot of places in America, really changed us substantially. And 08 was the year where a major part of America broke.
Yeah, amazing. If you want to know not just what's happening and what's happening next, but why, read everything Marc Caputo produces. If you want to read about the Bush reunion, go to Vanity Fair, VF.com, I think it is. Read Mark McKinnon's piece. Congressman, what are you pushing? What are you selling?
I'm a fellow at the Hoover Institution, but right now I just started as a columnist for The Pillar, which is a Catholic online magazine, but not writing necessarily about Catholic things. So that's
has that already started?
Big thing. I just started doing that. And last week I talked about the how partisanship has become a pseudo-religious identity for so many people, and that's killing our.
How high is that paywall at The Pillar?
It is $7 a month.
Okay, it's pillar.com or .org.
pillar Catholic.com.
Catholic.com. Somebody else had Pillar, seller of pillars. I'm very grateful to all three of you. I love having you on. I hope you'll come back regularly. And Mark McKinnon, I don't usually read the chat, but I've seen some praise for your hat there. So I know that's the first time you've had your hat praised. Thank you all. Very grateful for coming. Please come back soon. Some programming notes. First of all, I mentioned earlier, article in the Daily Caller that is a little bit about two-way. So if you're interested in reading about that, and I will put it in my Substack. If you subscribe, there'll be a link in there shortly. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time, like clockwork, regular deal, live on the two-way platform, live on YouTube, the morning meeting. Sean, Dan, and I will be here to bring you a preview of the day. Two other shows tomorrow, a little bit messed up, a little bit, as we say in Illinois, fakakta. Michael Moynihan's show, The Moynihan Report. If you want to watch it live and join Michael and his guest, Gavin McInnes, who's made a documentary about the history of Vice, one of the most interesting.
The guest is a guy named Thomas Morton, who made a documentary about Gavin
McInnes. Thank you very much. Thomas Morton will be Michael's guest. If you want to join live, be able to ask a question about the documentary about Gavin McInnes, who went from Vice to work to be associated with the Proud Boys. That's what the documentary is about. You can join live at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Thomas Morton and Michael talking about It's Not Funny Anymore, Vice to Proud Boys. It will air on YouTube right here on Two-Way at 7 p.m. Eastern time. But if you want to be part of the conversation, please join at 3 o'clock. All right? Once again, 3 o'clock live on the Two-Way platform, playback at 7 on YouTube. My show, similarly confusing. I will be live on the platform at 4:30 Eastern time. So if you want to join here on the platform, 4:30 Eastern time, please do. You'll get a link if you subscribe to the Substack. We'll have a regular hour-long show right at 4:30 Eastern time. And then my show will play at 6 o'clock. So if you watch on YouTube, you won't notice a difference. It'll look exactly the same. I'll ask people to raise their hands. You won't be able to raise your hand because it'll be on YouTube. So 4:30 live, 6 o'clock here on YouTube. And again, if that all confused you, just watch the morning meeting at 9 a.m. like usual. Very grateful to both Marks and Congressman Lipinski. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for everybody with the great questions. Kat, come back tomorrow, ask a question. And I'll see you at 9 a.m. Have a good night.